Good morning, Kaylee. Good morning, Fernanda, Michelle, Andrea. We are having a spot of tea before we go live with our discussion this morning. So please feel free to come on camera, bring your teacup or coffee, depending on what time zone of our global community you're joining us from. We'd love to say hello. You're also totally welcome to stay off camera and be like, I'm making my coffee, and I will see you in 5 minutes. Morning, Michelle.
Starbucks.
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 So, Michelle, since you're repping our Starbies, I have a funny story for you. I was just in Dubai, and at one of the newer souks, they actually have the Dubai Starbucks, and there was a line of tourists just to take a picture with the Starbucks mermaid sign on the outside. And I was like, this is a fascinating people watching. Why are we taking a picture with the mermaid? Like, do you not have the mermaid? So I'm wondering if that if you're excited about the Starbies from a global perspective.
Oh yeah. It's funny.
Good morning, Haley. Welcome. Karina, if I'm saying that right, good morning. We're joining for a spot of tea to have a little chat before we get going.
Fernanda, Frederico.
Frederico, good to see you. Welcome, welcome. Vivica, welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Devon.
It's a pleasure.
The president of our Rocky Mountain chapter.
Love it. I'm a huge fangirl of the Rocky Mountain chapter. Karina, welcome. Hillary and T. Walker. So you might see right now that just popped up our first poll or quiz. It'll take you about 10 seconds to answer, depending on how thoughtful you'd like to be. And we'd love to get your feedback before we get going with our fantastic panel. Oh, 27 people. What a lucky group we are. All right, looking at our questions, gonna take a look at these in a bit once everyone has had an opportunity to join us and take a look at that. Sarah, good morning. Welcome, welcome.
Good morning.
Or afternoon, I should say good
Afternoon,
morning.
yeah, it is, sorry.
Tis afternoon. Global
Losing
greetings
track
to
of the
your
day.
time zone.
Thank you very much.
Appropriate.
Sarah's one of our newer members in Dublin. Hello, Sarah.
It is. Hello, hello.
Hello.
Eager to go for 2026.
Yoo-hoo.
I think we're still in that time where we're writing out the date. It's like making the 5 a 6, like real quick with a darker pen.
It's definitely an easy one. It's easier than making a 3 or 4.
True. Yeah, totally different shape. Rob, good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are coming in from.
And shout out to Brian Hand, who just joined us from Dublin. He was our president last year, but still very much involved.
Hi, everybody.
Good morning. Actually, we would love for you to put in the chat all, since we are a transatlantic event today. Where are you joining us from, so we can say the appropriate salutation?
Yeah, could we put LinkedIn handles as well, perhaps?
Absolutely. And since it is officially the top of the hour, we are going to get going and say a happy good morning, good afternoon. I feel like the Truman Show, good morning, good afternoon, and good night. Thank you so much for joining us for the Breaking Borders event, a transatlantic conversation. Before we begin, we are doing a quick tech check. So if you can hear me clearly, so much seems like everyone can, because we are putting our locations in the chat. But if you can throw up a thumbs up or an emoji, just so we know. Thank you, Vivica, so we can make sure that we are going correctly. This event has been created with generosity, collaboration, and genuine desire to share practical insights and a spirit that truly matters. Today's conversation is about what planners on both sides of the Atlantic are actually experiencing right now and how we can move forward with confidence. So before we dive in, it is super important to say our thank yous and acknowledgments for everyone who's helped bring this event together. A huge thank you to Event Point and our Chris Shelton and his incredible team. They're the technical experts behind our scenes today, ensuring that everything runs smoothly and helping us capture high quality recordings that will extend the value of this conversation beyond today. If you have colleagues who can't join us, make sure that you let us know so we can connect and get them the recording. This event is a true collaboration between the MPI UK and Ireland chapter and the MPI Rocky Mountain chapter. Thank you to everyone who supported our registration, communications, and marketing, and the many behind the scenes details that make this event feel seamless. From the MPI Rocky Mountain chapter, thank you so much, Haley Harmon. From the MPI UK and Ireland chapter, thank you to Janet, Tracy, Carlos, Felicia, Natalie, Sheila, Laura, and Elizabeth. And a special thank you as well to Jeanette of She Plans Co., whose guidance has been invaluable throughout the process. And finally, this event was founded and brought to life through the collaboration of Brooke Eater of SoundCloud and Kiara Feely of Steps to Win and Sheila Evans of WorldSpan. Thank you so much for this vision. Kiara and Brooke, I know you're here, and we'd love to hear the quick anecdote of how this event came to be. So Brooke, I'm going to start with you. Can you share a little bit?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. My name is Brooke Eater. I'm the VP of Membership for the Rocky Mountain chapter. A little over a year ago, I stepped into my current role leading the global events program at Cloudsmith, which is a software company headquartered in Belfast, Northern Ireland. And until then, most of my events had been based in the US. But suddenly my calendar was filled with events across the UK and Ireland. With my role becoming more global, I wanted to build meaningful connections and expand my professional network in the UK and Ireland. So I leaned into what I love most about MPI, the community. I looked up the contact information for MPI UK and Ireland's board on their chapter website and reached out to the community team, which felt like the most fitting team to reach out to. I was then connected with Kiara Feely and Sheila Evans, who couldn't have been more welcoming. They offered helpful guidance and even supported me by sharing a job posting as I looked to hire an event coordinator in the UK. During one of our first calls last April, we found ourselves swapping stories about the challenges of planning events across borders, which sparked the idea for our chapters to co-host a virtual panel. Meeting in person later that summer at the WEC conference in St. Louis only strengthened that connection. Partnering with the MPI UK and Ireland chapter has been such a joy. Planning this event together has been a perfect example of what MPI does best, bringing people together across chapters and across borders to learn from one another and build true community. That spirit of connection is what Breaking Borders is all about. Kiara, I'll pass it over to you to share how this virtual event fits into the community program, and then we'll dive into today's conversation. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for that. And we were really delighted that you reached out to us because this is actually the first collaboration between the US and UK and Ireland chapters. And there's a pun on tea, community as in TEA. And that is a drink and it's a word and a feeling that's very important to me. And initially, these community events were designed by myself and Emma Wellstead. And in the good old days of COVID, we came up with this concept and we really wanted to make sure that it was an event that people could turn up to with a cup of tea and just feel like they were sitting at the kitchen table, sitting around having a chat. Now, if you remember 2020, everything went online, but they became events that people threw information at us. And we wanted to do the opposite, so people could feel welcome to have a cup of tea. And we were trying to come up with an idea for the name of this event. And Emma's colleague came up with the word community, spelled TEA. And it struck me, I went, I can't believe she came up with that word, because a year earlier, you see what's written on my hand there, community. That photo was taken at the WEC at MPI in Toronto. And One World created this event where they take a photograph of you with something written on you that is important to you. And I came up with community because community I love. I want my clients to feel that they're part of a community, and I also want them to feel that when they're working with me, they can sit down and have a cup of tea because Kira is taking care of training their team. So that is how community was born.
Thank you both so much. I've loved this story since the beginning because it's wonderful to see how MPI, from a global perspective, can bring people together and make lasting impact. So we're going to segue into our community opportunity with a quick note on how you can participate in the flow of our event. So this event is designed to be as interactive and conversational as Kiara said. We want you to feel like you're sitting around the kitchen table with three of our fantastic leaders having a cup of tea and a chat to make an impact. So feel free to use the raise your hand function if you'd like to speak. Turn on your camera if you're comfortable so we can see your faces. No worries if it's early morning or late afternoon. Your face is what matters. And of course, use the chat and Q&A if you prefer to ask your questions privately. We're going to open the conversation for questions towards the end of the event. So feel free to note all your questions as you go so we can join after we hear from our panelists. So sit back and listen and get interactive. Speaking of shared, we opened a poll right when at the top of the hour when things got started. Thank you so much, Chris, for throwing it up. We want to look at what describes your connection to international events. And it looks like the top two are I support international events as a supplier or planner, and I plan international events. So great, we're speaking to our global audience. Moving down to our biggest challenge and questions that we're facing right now, looks like, let's see, geopolitical and economic uncertainty. Of course, we're all kind of looking at that right now. We're going to talk a little bit about that and working effectively with our global suppliers. You are going to hear so much about that. Our panelists are going to address both of those. And our last question was, what would be the most helpful in today's conversation? Strategic perspective on global trends and what's coming, and of course, a mix of all of the above. Good thing is you're going to get all of that and more on today's panel. Chris, thanks so much for throwing that up for us. So the industry events has always been global, but the world we're planning in right now, as you've all mentioned, feels more complex, more regulated, and of course, more uncertain than it has in years. So today, with our panelists, we're going to explore the global shifts, perspective, data, and lived experiences that are shaping decisions on both sides of the Atlantic, where you as planners can look practically and look ahead to the future. So now it is time. We are delighted to be joined by an incredible group of panelists. Welcome, Greg. He is the Senior Contracting and Housing Manager at Informa, specializing in global venue negotiations and large-scale event logistics with over 20 years of experience. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning. So happy to be here. Thank you all.
Thanks for joining us. Viola brings over 15 years of experience in global meetings and events and is a recognized operational leader in building high-performing international teams and delivering complex, customer-centric programs across sectors. Good afternoon, Viola.
Hello, Devon. Thank you so much, and great to see everyone.
Welcome, welcome. And last but not least, Michael leads global sales organizations as CEO of ALHI that has 400 hotels around the globe and is heavily involved in the meetings and events industry in leadership roles. And as a special note, is a past chair of MPI's International Board in 2012. And in his own words, absolutely bleeds MPI. Welcome, panelists. We are delightful. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Devon. Thanks for having me.
So to start us off, we'd like to hear from each of you and your unique perspectives. What feels materially different right now about planning and supporting global events as compared to even a year ago? Viola, I'd like to start with you on this one. What feels materially different, like the biggest shift that you've noticed?
Yes, no, thank you, Devon. And I think you just mentioned a couple of seconds ago, and I think what feels really different is that uncertainty is no longer the exception, is the baseline, it's the norm. And a year ago, the planners were maybe just on the tail of the recovery mode, rebuilding attendance and rebuilding those suppliers' relationships. Whereas now we are a little bit more stable, more mature, but it's a fragile environment still. Costs are higher, lead times longer, and decisions they do feel more consequential. So, a couple of differences: budget still feels tighter even when they're bigger. Attendees are more selective toward the travel and they're expecting more value and ROI, as we'll talk about. Risk awareness is higher. Data. It matters more across all our events and all our strategies. And global planning feels more intentional. So there is great respect for local regulation and different cultural nuances, as we'll see later.
Thank you, Viola. Greg, want to go over to you. From your perspective, what do you feel is materially different right now?
I think there are a few things that really are more important and more difficult than they were last year. I think that certainly the economic shifts, the tariffs are not helpful. Budgets have, had to be adaptive, and you have to react faster in a lot of cases to changes in your budget. I would say that the political situation for bringing meetings into the United States is a lot less. It's not as easy as it was. There's a lot of back and forth talking with people who are like, we're just not into that. We're unhappy with the things that we're hearing and seeing. So there's a lot of expressing value of why you should come still, and hand holding and relationship maintaining that goes into that. Also, some disruptions in supply chains, things like that make some things a little harder to get on time, and really just looking more, in the regulatory and sustainability field, where those are huge things now, where, always or has been more important in Europe than, to present sustainable and maybe zero waste or carbon neutral practices. That is becoming much more important here as well.
Thank you, Greg, for those rich perspectives. Michael, last but not least, again, for you, especially with your leadership, how you manage global accounts and portfolios, and of course your work with the travel industry. For you, what do you feel is the biggest shift, even from a year ago?
Yeah, I'm going to add to something Viola said just a minute ago. Is I think we have more certainty, and we've added new uncertainty, because there's certain things we now know what the roadmap is. And, when Greg mentions tariffs, that they're in play. So we at least know what that was. Last year, we were trying to deal with it in the middle of it. And as you start to know it's there, it makes it a little more certain. But then we have all this other uncertainty. And there's a couple of things, I think, high level at 30,000 feet that we've kind of missed. And something I pointed out last year, we get really focused on the US administration changed, but 67% of the world GDP had an election last year. Every major modern democracy has a new government in play. And one of the reasons it feels so chaotic, and we talk about there's still uncertainty, you have governments still getting their footing on what are going to be their priorities, what does that look like, and that is universal, and we're seeing it on both sides of the pond. And part of it, when Greg talks about that, I'm part of the U.S. Travel Association. Getting past the rhetoric that is optics versus what the real numbers are is really a challenge for us. And that is the one thing where it's very true what Greg says. There's this hesitancy around the United States, but some of it is literally perception versus reality. We talked about this briefly, earlier in the week. Anybody coming from Europe, you're on a visa waiver program, which means the visa process is a zero issue, zero. If you have international attendees coming from certain parts of the country that aren't visa waiver, then it becomes a little bit problematic. More from a timing perspective than it is from a political optics perspective. And we're finding that universally, but I also put into the play, I have US clients that said, Europe now has new rules on having to apply online for a visa. Even though it's an online process, that's new. And that was not something we had in the past. And that is just that new step that everybody's kind of like, I got to educate on one side or another.
Michael, that is such a great, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that is such a great segue actually into sort of what we're going to get started when planners or what they could overlook and be focusing on. But we want to set a great foundation. Viola, we want to talk because there was about 20% of our audience who need to start getting into international events or are still kind of finding their footing. So what advice would you give to someone who's just kind of getting started? And then Michael, we're going to bring you back in to share some more of those overlooking sort of travel insights. So Viola, What advice? Start it off.
Yeah. And Brooke mentioned it earlier. She had been organizing events for years, and yet, as soon as you cross borders and you start organizing events across the Atlantic, then everything that you knew kind of shifts, and you're not really sure where it would stand. So the first practical advice is that to assume that nothing translates one to one. So timelines, contracting norms. So all the minimum F&B versus the renting cost. In Europe, we pay for meeting room costs, whether it's DDR or normal rental. In my experience, some European venues have contracts only in their language, local languages. So again, not assuming that English will be the language where you get your contracts. Commissions are different. Bed and breakfast rates, whether the breakfast is included or not, without even touching on the labor roles, taxes, VAT. So from a practical standpoint, from a sourcing standpoint, contracting, there are vast differences between the regions. And let's not forget that Europe is not one country. There are tons of countries with its cultural nuances and differences that require time. And you need to make sure that you build extra time and local validation into every phase, as the US tends to be more centralized. Also, when you speak to stakeholders, depending where they're sitting, decision making tends to be quicker and more centralized in the US. In Europe, it might take a little bit longer. And jargon, syndicate rooms, breakouts. We love acronyms. You just need to look at our company names, right? And so not only the acronyms, on top of that, you put actual different words. I remember when I started and organizing across, and everyone was talking about TDs, and I was like, "What is it?" Ask questions. That's like people will answer rather than do like me and trying to understand and eventually say, "Oh, okay." So there are 8 travel directors, so found out the acronyms, but also how I call them. So whether it's freelancer, contractors, temp workers. So it does vary a lot. And if you can invest in very early in local expertise, so whether it's DMC, a venue partner, a regional advisor, it will save you money
Absolutely
down the line.
And thanks for giving that permission. I think, and Michael, you had touched on it earlier. It's like we kind of go 1,000 miles a minute. And we were talking about, off camera before you all joined us about the stress of our industry. And I think in that speed, we forget it's okay. You have to ask questions, especially, Viola, as you just said, stop the assumptions. Like immediately go into, I know nothing. And maybe even setting the timeline of, I may ask a few clarification questions along the way, just ensure we're aligned on language or we're aligned on process. So, really opening it up with stopping the assumptions and getting the ability to ask questions. Michael, you did touch in your opening, and thank you so much, about these overlooked issues that sometimes as planners we forget to focus on. You mentioned timelines, you mentioned travel, you mentioned the government, and I want to go back to that one specifically because again, you opened up with, and Greg, you kind of touched on this too, that government changes and can change with values and perception, but you opened up with global government change. Can you just touch on how we as planners or new planners might need to dial into that and what implications that could have?
Yeah, I think we just have to pay attention that as these new governments are getting set, they are all having a little bit of a different priority. The one constant priority that everybody is dealing with, specifically in Europe and in the United States, is they have debt they are trying to figure out how to finance. And that is government debt. That's why France has had such a little bit of a chaotic turn because they're trying to figure out how to do that. The reason that matters, most governments see our industry as free money. And what I mean by that is there's pockets of money that are raised by our industry that they all of a sudden see these are monies that we can raise that aren't tax monies necessarily coming from the people that can help with some of the other issues. It's very interesting that you're going to have visitation places. So you're going to have an event and people are going to go to the Louvre. And if you're an international visitor, there's a higher fee to go than if you're a local resident. Well, the US is doing the same thing now. If you're going to go to a national park, there's going to be a fee for international visitors while there's no fee for a US visitor. Those kind of changes are all happening right now. And I think it's really important for us to just keep aware that
Absolutely.
there's a lot of movement going on. And when you talk about moving fast, there's a quote from John Wooden. He's a famous basketball coach, but he was a teacher, and he always says, "Move fast, but don't hurry." And
Wow.
I think that's a great message for us because we are moving fast, but if you hurry, you're not asking those questions. And this is not a plug for MPI, but I would lean into your MPI community. If you are
Yeah,
going to a place you've never planned before, reach out to the Gregs of the world to say, what advice do you have for me? You've planned in that area, or Viola, what advice do you have? You've been in those areas. I think sometimes we're afraid to reach out to and tap the people that have already had the experience. And
absolutely.
once you got sideswiped by the car, you're kind of looking for the car. So reach out to all of us so that we can actually share with those experiences.
And again, giving the permission as we start going across borders and things are shifting at the rate which they are, to start asking questions, to ask for help. Again, in our fast moving environment, like you just said, we hurry probably more. And Viola, we go over and we don't ask, what is that acronym mean? Without sounding ignorant, like, I don't know what that one is. Can we stop for a second and make sure that I'm aligned on language? Because in that hurrying, that's where those assumptions take place and probably too far down the line to fix. But you both said the word assumptions, and Greg, I want to shift to you here, because we've talked a lot, and you were very delicate in your language during your first question, to talk about perception and reality and values. So right now, when it comes to global planning and events, could you just go a little deeper for us and talk about those gaps between perception, reality, and how sometimes value language needs to be put back in, some reassurance? Could you round that out for us and expound on that?
Sure. I I have a particular event that has a heavy European delegation uh, attendance that comes over, and so the perceptions can be that we are unwelcoming and that
Mm,
there's this our way or the highway thing, and it really um, for all of us couldn't be farther from the truth because we want these people, we want to show them who we are and what our event can do for them. So there's a lot of just education, I think, that we have to be willing to give, and we also have to be able to sit down and listen. Tell me what it is that you need from us. What are the specific barriers that you are finding, or that you're not able to sell a package to come to the U.S. to our event? What challenges can we help you address, and how do we really meet you where you are so that we understand how this works for both of us, and really taking that back, you know not only to our internal teams, but to
mm,
people like the USCA and saying, this is what we're hearing. Help
right.
us, be
Hmm.
our advocate.
Yeah. And it really does sound like we need to learn and listen and ensure that we're listening to what the values are and find some alignment, and maybe also be willing to say if this is really not what you want to do, like, where else can we go and have that adaptability. Michael, you are my go-to in terms of stats. So could you briefly, in following up on this idea of perception, is there one or two data facts you can give us that either confirm
Yeah.
that there is a concern, or any data that's like, actually, there's a challenge to this that maybe we can use to feel a little bit better? So, quick one or two data points.
I'll give you three data points really quick. CES is going on right now, all-time record with 145,000 people. It's
Wow.
going on right now, and that's the largest international attendance you're going to find. So I think we get anecdotal information versus what we get in reality of stats. You've heard people were worried about FIFA because we're
Mm,
unwelcoming. What's that going to mean? They've sold 150 million tickets to
wow.
date, and it's an all-time record. So we get what is the rhetoric, and then we're getting what is reality. And it doesn't mean people are happy about it, to Greg's point. I think there is some nervousness, there's the reservations, but
Mm,
people are still buying and they're still moving. And then the last and final data point, if you remove Canada from the equation, the US is actually up in international travel. And Mexico is up almost 2 million people to date in international travel in 2025. So it's a mixed bag on the
mm,
international front. And even
okay.
in Europe, Germany was down, but Spain and Italy were up dramatically. And I go, well, maybe that has a little bit to do with economies
Okay.
because Germany's economy is suffering. are struggling, yet you know Italy and Spain are on fire, and we see that in international traffic. So those are just some quick data points to say we hear it, and it is real because what is perception becomes reality. So it's something we're all having to deal with. But I
Absolutely.
think we need to be armed with the facts to tell people. We're having very successful international programs that are happening and setting all-time records, even with all that chaos that's out there.
And that's super helpful again, because sometimes, when you hear the anecdotes, the stories, it's what we remember. And that's what we go to our bosses. That's what we go to our clients. And it's the anecdotal story. But as both you and Greg and Viola have mentioned, it's an assumption. And we can't really go into our hardcore planning with the assumptions. And so thank you so much for those facts. I know that FIFA was a big part of the conversation, especially with people being able to come over. And Greg, to your point, we're not welcoming, but the fact that 150 million tickets is insane. And what I really love is all of you are giving permission for leaders to actually take a moment to stop, to look at data points, to make sure, yes, you hear the anecdotes and understand the values, but you can respond strategically to data instead of emotionally to those anecdotes. I want to go into understanding a little bit more about data and decision making. Michael, I think for those points, when it comes to global events, Viola, I want to start with you. How do data points like that show up in your day-to-day planning decisions, and where can it help the most in actual practice?
So definitely the first point would be to unify data sources in terms of global events. Again, regionally, they're probably already unified and it works, but we need to find something that works across the globe. And everything from registration to marketing to housing, on-site system, everything should feed into one dashboard so that you can spot regional trends and global trends and predict. Use the data to localize, not just measure. So the engagement patterns, they will differ market to market, and you need to adjust the agendas, the content, timing. Again, different segments of your audience will react to these changes differently, and you need to be able to track those patterns. And finally, I'll quickly mention to predict and not just report. We come from historically to report. We now have enough data that we should really use everything to, once it's centralized, use it to predict attendance, travel patterns, pricing, and make sure that we forecast demand and pricing sensitivity as much as possible. As we said, we do live in certain times, but we do have some certainties, as Michael said, and we can definitely feed that in and make sure that we have predictions and we use the technology and the data in a smart way.
Thank you. I love the word prediction. And I think sometimes we only do assessment data. We take, where do we go in the past and what does that mean? But as you and Michael both mentioned, in these uncertain times, it's the new data that we need to use to do some strategic forward thinking towards success as to what that can mean and give us some data points to make great decisions for forward thinking instead of just looking backwards, especially since what's that turkey thinking? All the data up to a certain point makes a difference, but come Christmas morning, things are going to be pretty different. And I think that really helps us focus on these data points. Greg, want to bring you into this. How are you seeing data and technology used most effectively right now? Is it enhancing your insights or engagement attendance? Are you seeing something similar?
Absolutely. I think that Viola brought up some excellent points about, making sure that your data is integrated and that you're using your CRM and your marketing platform, whatever those may be, and getting past that descriptive analytics into the predictive and prescriptive types of analytics that really help you understand how you can make your event more successful. I think that one of the things that I've seen at a couple of our events that was incredibly insightful was using the registration data and another system to create heat maps of where people are going. This actually showed that we are seeing drop off in this afternoon keynote session, and people are just heading out the door. So what do we do with that? Well, okay, they said we saw about 40% of our people head out the door So we're going to not do that keynote anymore. We're going to do, lightning sessions that are more engaging and not make it an hour and a half. And so that brought 35% of those people back. So that was really something
Wow.
that was a win for that, and really, helps you kind of allocate your resources where they need to be, because your resources are scarce. So you have to point them at those high level and high value activities. One of the other things that we've seen in a couple of our events is also sort of using like um, beacons and things to map traffic. And one of our events had 20% of the boost accounted for 80% of the traffic. So what did
Wow.
they need to do? Well, they looked at the outliers and the people who are not seeing value, and overnight they moved them into these high traffic aisles. Another event used that information to create an engagement zone so that people who were maybe smaller players, were able to reap the benefits and have more traffic. And it created a sponsorship opportunity for them, where now they not only had happier exhibitors and attendees with better networking opportunities, they also were able to monetize the engagement zone so that people were willing to pay more to actually be there.
Yeah. And Greg, these are just fantastic points, but even for some of us who aren't doing international events, those are fantastic points. And something as simple as, I love what you just said, I want to repeat that: high level and high value. But what you also expressed was that high value doesn't necessarily mean the $100,000 keynote at 4 o'clock.
Right.
Michael, as you said, going between you and the bar or dinner, people are mentally kind of done at that point, and maybe a keynote isn't the best allocation of resources. All three of you have mentioned allocation of resources and budget. So to shift the thinking into utilizing and, Viola, predicting where people are going can shift and bring people back in and create those high value moments. We are, wow, just that half hour flew by so fast. I want to stop for a second because I think there are some great questions coming in. Dr. Erica, you asked, can some practices be sunset? Love that term. I think there are some strategies that used to make sense and people are still clinging to this is how we've always done it, familiarity, but maybe they're no longer effective. Michael, I'm going to open it up with you since you've seen the biggest shifts and go across properties and time zones. What do you think could really be sunset right now to make us more agile and adaptable to our more uncertain environments and moving past, certainty to new uncertainty?
A couple of things I would mention, and when we do our events with ALHI, we always say we're trying to create a laboratory for the planners. So we're trying to do some of those things. But one of the things I would really mention is our agendas. If you're not, I think there's too little white space in the agendas we've created. And in the distracted world we're in, if you don't allow people to know that they've got a 2 to 3 hour window where they can breathe, check emails, do phones, they're not even present when they're in the room
Right.
because they're on their devices, they're looking at an email, they're doing some work that they have to do. And what we've learned, and our agendas have always been from 8 to 5, I am just jammed with content. Instead of, from 8 to 2, we're going to have content, but from 2 to 5, you've got some time to breathe before we gather back in the evening.
Mm,
And I think that's something we really have to start to evaluate and look at because, to Greg's point, it's not, I think it was so much about, quantity versus the quality of what you're offering. And if you can condense it, that is a big point. One thing I've sunsetted in our events is we don't have panels. And the reason we don't do panels is we call them trend talks instead. But if you think about our industry, I'm going to bring somebody up and we're going to talk about the airline industry for 20 minutes. And then let's have some real Q&A about that. And then I'm going to bring somebody and we're going to talk about the hotel industry for 20 minutes. Instead of having an hour and a half panel that I have somebody from the airline industry, somebody from a DMO, somebody from a hotel, and we're going down it. And Devon compliments, and I do mean this, if you don't have a great facilitator running a panel, it is the driest thing you will ever experience. And it's hard to make it natural and organic.
mm,
But what we've done is we also have taken, I think we need to start bringing neuroscience back into our meeting.
yes.
If I know I can't keep your attention for more than 20 to 25 minutes at a time, why do I have an agenda item that says I'm going to have an hour and a half session? I've lost you. So the reason
Absolutely.
we've broken it up is we've also brought in the neuroscience back into it. I think those are some of the things that we can, and it doesn't mean a panel should never be there. but it should be there not because you're trying to make sure everybody's represented. You're putting a panel because the content is going to be so valuable to the people that are trying to receive it.
Absolutely.
And I think that's it. We just got to
Yeah.
really look at that agenda and try to, if you're talking about sunsetting, there's nothing that should be a sacred cow at all. You know, I think people are looking for my time to be back.
Absolutely. It's so funny that you mentioned neuroscience, because I think if you look at content in our global meetings right now, wellness, neuroscience, psychology is trending as one of the number one topics people are attending, because we forgot the people portion of our industry. And I think there was a statistic that said we have changed more as a human race in the last 5 years than we did in the 50 kind of leading up to the 2020. So need to go back. Viola, I want to bring you into this because of your, real success in building global teams from an internal perspective and looking at our humans who are doing the work and feeling the shift. What do you think needs to shift or sundown or change as we look at internally building our teams and finding success?
I think that, as you said, in the last 5 years, the event industry has had such a transformation that's been great to see, and we don't hear that, but it's always been that way that often anymore, and everyone is open. And I think we were mentioning before in the before we started our chat about how these new generations that are coming on, for as much as we're teaching them, they are teaching us, and we are evolving with them. So whether it is the 20-minute presentations, whether it is the peer-to-peer learning rather than a lecture based or on demand agenda, so you're in charge of how your day evolves. So internally, we have to be prepared. We have to be on the forefront of these changes and understanding the neuroscience, as you both mentioned, but also behavioral sciences, and understanding how these new attendees are now using this information, and they want to be part of the event, and they want to, it's a constant interaction. It's not, the all networking sessions. And we
Absolutely.
need to understand how that impacts the venues that we choose and the programs and the event flow, and to create these spaces for these new realities that are part of our life and our events.
I think you just touched on one of these. I won't call it a buzzword, but trend talks is this idea of belonging, and what you're both shifting to. And Greg, you've shifted the same thing in terms of bringing international audiences. Is I think before we wanted to fit in, and everyone wanted to fit in and do the networking exactly the same and do the schedule exactly the same, and you had to sort of shift who you were fundamentally to fit into our industry. And now we're shifting towards, we want you to come as you are. We want to understand your values. We want to see what's important to you, transatlantic, and see where we can find that commonality on emotional data and value points to make people feel like you are so welcome, and that belonging, and also seeing them in venue selection, white space within programs, not just those high level, again, I told you, your $100,000 keynotes who may sound great on paper, but don't necessarily bring as much value. Instead of, I really want to hear from the top two execs in the hotel industry. I really need to hear what's going on in the airline industry, and I want to get that and use it and be more effective. All of you said in the poll that you want real information, practical takeaways, and sometimes those big, one-way moments don't necessarily get you something practical to take away. We have one more question we have time for, and it's Chiara actually threw this one in there, but interested in knowing how the partner communities, your hotels, your CVB, your transport, your tech company, Viola, you mentioned all the venue selections and sort of all the supporting cast of characters. How can these companies collaborate and better partner with you, the global organizers, or vice versa? How can you use them better in collaboration to create more effective events? Greg, I want to throw this one to you first.
Yeah, I think that as the meeting planner who is sitting quarter at the center of all of these people, it's our opportunity to start the conversations about how people can work together. Is your registration company, are they integrating with your housing provider? Is your housing provider providing, real-time reporting to hotels? I know that we did that with MGM when I was back on the on-peak side. You So it's just a matter of, how do you get everyone on the same page to collaborate and to use the same terminology and to make sure that the data is, that is being shared is as clean and effective as possible. But overall, just, getting those communications started up front before, the process really begins. Hear all the players, identifying all the stakeholders, and really making sure that everyone has a seat at the table and a voice so that you can craft the most effective and valuable program you can.
Fantastic. It's so interesting. All of you have touched on some of these great points about assumptions and really clear communications up front to reduce the negative assumptions, to reduce issues in that, and using that as sort of that initial connection with your partners to say, hey, let's sit down, let's take a breath, let's take a pause, and really go quickly, as Michael said, but not hurry through those conversations to ensure that the foundation is so strong before you move forward. Want to wrap it up with each of you with one sentence so we can really have these practical takeaways for our listeners. What is that one takeaway or piece of advice that planners should carry forward as they plan or step into across borders? Viola, your one like your favorite nugget, what would that be?
So for me would be to bear in mind that the most successful cross-border events, they will not be the ones that avoid uncertainty, as we said, but are the ones that build flexibility, data visibility, and trusted partnership into the planning from the start. And sometimes pick up the phone. I know it might not be the favorite way to communicate anymore, but you
Phone
can
is
get
coming back.
more, really. So
Pick up the phone.
pick up
Love
the
it.
phone.
It's so much faster. And it's like you said, there's some lag sometimes. It's like just pick up the phone.
Pick up the phone.
Easiest thing to do. Michael, your one takeaway, your data point, your favorite, who do we connect with to get, success?
I think you need to do your homework and really understand it. And I think sometimes we forget culture, to really spend time in understanding the culture you're going into. And in my past life, that was something that was really embedded in us. And one data point that I think would help you into the future is to look at the airlines. OAG, I would recommend, and it's a free resource. But if you look at the seats that the airlines are putting out, it will tell you, because they have a better crystal ball than we do because of the advanced bookings, and you'll see where travel is and what's happening. And that's where you get rid of some of these assumptions. Because if you see a lot of international seats being added, it's because they're seeing a lot of international traffic or it wouldn't be there. So highly
Fantastic.
recommend getting ahead of that.
Love a good resource. I think Brooke just put the link in the chat. Y'all go to that. Again, Viola said predictive info, right? Not reactive info. Greg, real quick before we segue to our favorite MPI team member, one quick takeaway, piece of advice.
Just as you're moving across borders, really make sure that you have a trusted advisor in that locale. Don't be me. Don't assume that the software is going to be able to handle the local, characters, or that your QWERTY keyboard is going to work in Finland, because it won't, and your registration model will be a disaster. Lesson learned.
QWERTY keyboards are not global, friends. Fantastic piece of info. Thank you all so much, panelists, and creating this cross-border community. Want to shift, as our love for MPI brought all of you together to share this information. Tim, want to bring you into the conversation. Welcome. Timothy actually supports all of the external facing teams at MPI Global, and we engage with 12,500 active members, over 1,000 volunteers who support industry growth through international and local leadership, like our fantastic panelists, and support our global community of 180,000 people annually. Tim, thanks so much for helping us support this fantastic panel, this cross collaboration between transatlantic chapters. I've never seen something so fantastic. So how can someone leverage MPI to help them plan internationally? I know Michael said this was the number one thing. We've talked about communication. So how can we start to leverage that?
Well, Portia just stole my thunder. She said, I love the phone. Bring back the phone. That's so important just for you to utilize the MPI network of 12,000 plus members around the world. This event grew because Brooke had a need, and Brooke utilized some of the resources that we have available here at MPI to really help her grow herself and to fit into this new wonderful position that she had. There's a couple things that I always encourage people. If you really want to truly make the most of your MPI membership, one, the member directory is the most powerful tool that all of you as members have access to. And how people can use that directory is exactly what Brooke did when she had that need. She went to go find the local chapter where she had an event that she had to plan. She pulled up that chapter directory and she found planners on there. And she probably just started emailing a few of them and saying, hey, do you have some time? Can we get on a Zoom? That's how you can use this. Mike referenced this, and a few of you others have referenced this, is find somebody who's locally who can help you do your job. DMOs, CVBs, all of those are fantastic, but sometimes it's nice just to hear from a fellow planner. And it's really wonderful to kind of hear from somebody who's in the location that you're planning. So again, use that directory to your advantage. Second thing I always tell people, and while we love using the phone, we love Zoom, we love all of this opportunity, is don't forget that you have this another powerful tool available to you. It's the MPI community forums. These are really cool opportunities for you to connect with other planners from around the world. Sometimes when we're planners, we think we know all of the answers, or we hesitate when something new comes to our desk. And you can use the community forums to throw something out there to get some feedback from your colleagues. You know, maybe there's something new that your company is initiating. There's a new attendance policy that you have for your conferences or your events. Maybe you just want to get a template or something. Go out there to the Just Planners community and throw your question out there, or throw your concern that you have out there, and get some feedback from your colleagues around the world. So again, it's the directory, it's the forums. And then finally, do as many of you have done, and this event is a great example of that. Go to other chapter events. We all travel extensively. Mike is on the West Coast right now. He's from the Dallas area, so he's all over the place. And so many of you travel so frequently. So when you're traveling, before you book your plans, go hit the local chapter website to see if there's an event, because as all of us love going to our local chapter, whether it's the Rocky Mountain chapter events or it's a UK, Ireland, try to experience another chapter event in a city or a state that you're traveling to. If the schedule works out, book yourself that and get on that registration list. So Devon, member directory, we've talked about that. The online community forums, and go to chapter events. This is a face-to-face profession. This is what we do, is we bring people together. So go to another chapter event.
You know, it's so funny. You've kept sharing all these resources, and all of you on the panel have shared these fantastic resources. And one of the things we've heard most, and some of our poll has said that, is in our careers are shifting global. Our careers are shifting to predictive modeling and communication. So Tim, or and all of our panelists, if you want to weigh in, how has MPI or these communities helped grow your career, and how can we look into that as we're shifting into what looks new and what looks global? Tim, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, how to use your membership to really sort of make you excel in your career, doing exactly what you do today. And I often say, like, MPI membership, it's like a gym membership. We all have a goal when you purchase that 1-year annual membership. But if you don't actually step into that gym, you're not going to get much results out of it. And the other portion of that is,
you had to bring up the gym, Tim. Come on.
I know. Listen, but hey, it's all about making us healthier. Whether you join MPI to make you stronger, or you join a gym to make you stronger, it's all the same. But listen, when you get to that gym, you can't just go on that treadmill, because there's so many other opportunities out there. Move beyond what you're comfortable with, which is the treadmill, and go to the aerobics class, hit some of the free weights, get a personal trainer, do what you feel that is not available to you. Those are some of the best things that you can do to kind of expand your knowledge.
Absolutely. And, I think you heard a lot of that, Viola, Greg, and Michael. You've all given us permission to be uncomfortable. And our growth is going to come from that discomfort. Our growth is going to come from saying, I don't know what TD means. Michael, you threw out a what's a UOA, and I was like, I have no idea what that acronym means. Like, should I Google it really quickly? There was a funny movie about the girl, she starts working at a finance place and she has no idea what she's doing, and so she gets caught Googling finance. And they're like, did you just Google that? She's like, yes, I Google. But taking the time to be uncomfortable, but also all three of you have leaders have said it's okay. It's okay not to know that. And as we grow into our communities and grow into global, to say, hey, I don't know what that means. Can we take a step back? And that permission to try something new, to say we're uncomfortable. I know we're getting close to the end, but Greg, Viola, Michael, all of you have joined organizations that make you more successful or have helped you in careers. Is there one quick, and one or two of you can take this, how these organizations has helped you grow in some way?
Yeah, well, I'll go just from my MPI experience. When I was on the international board, it was eye-opening, and it's to Tim's point. In my year, I visited 35 of our 70 plus chapters during that time
Wow.
frame. There was a need for it. There was a big shift in MPI. It wasn't, believe me, I wasn't trying to set a record. And the one thing I learned is, going to different parts of the world and really starting to understand the people and the pain. What I found was we have so much in common. We're not as separated as we think we are, but there are unique challenges and unique customs in every one of those areas.
Yeah.
And I think that is my learning. I had a much broader perspective around a global condition after being chair of MPI, and a greater appreciation. And I know this sounds very Pollyanna, but I always say that our industry, I think, could solve a lot of the social ills that the world faces. Because if you're not traveling, travel gets rid of ignorance and bigotry,
Yes.
because you start to understand that different parts of the world are different, and you start to understand that people are different. So that was my benefit, and that came from MPI. And now it forces me to, when I go travel, and the one thing I want to impress on people, please open your eyes and pay attention, get off your device for a minute, and
Yeah.
pay attention to the culture and the environment. And it's even in the United States. The East Coast is different than the West Coast, and the Southwest is very different than the Midwest. All the people are similar, but the experiences are very different. And I think we need to embrace that.
Thank you so much for that message, Michael. Really, really and truly, I think you're right. And, Viola and Greg and Tim, you've all touched on, when we get to these places, is don't assume that English is the first language. And I think Americans are sometimes a little bit aggressive about that. It's like, I'm just going to start this way, or I just assume that you're going to do things how I want to take a step back and to remember that there's beautiful differences and how to embrace them and how to incorporate them. And Greg, Viola, I know I've seen you do this in your fantastic events, is incorporating your local culture, incorporating the art, incorporating the food, to remind us that there's a way to connect. Greg, you said we have more similarities actually than we do differences. Real quick, Viola, I saw you jump off sharing how we can grow our careers together.
Yeah, and my experience with MPI is not as extensive as Michael's. I haven't been to that many chapters, but one thing that I do love is the apprenticeship program that
Okay.
they run, and we are in the third year, and I just love just working on the next generations of planners. So just introducing this wonderful industry to new people who may have heard, or they might still Google event management, as, as you mentioned, and it's just great to see how and we all said it, it's if people choose to work in events, they do want to help, they have open mind and open heart, and everyone wants to help. So absolutely, be uncomfortable, ask the questions, and just let's make the next generation even better than like we all said, don't do like me, be better.
Thank you all for bringing that beautiful human message, because Michael said we're always voted the top 10 most stressful industry, but on the flip side, to look at the other perspective, we have the most global industry. We touch the most people, we learn the most, we have the most in person, and especially coming out of the pandemic, we were the one thing people wanted to go back to, was that human to human connection. And I think it's why we're seeing the most growth and success coming out of that. Panelists, you have made this such a beautiful experience. Transatlantic this morning, where I am here in South Texas, and of course, our UK afternoon. It's a cup of tea everywhere, but a community that you've definitely built and helped us grow. Can't thank you enough. You've really given us the opportunity to communicate and to give us permission to stop and ask questions, to change how we value events, to change how we see people. And Greg, to your point, high value doesn't necessarily mean one person. It could mean a community, it could mean your locals, it could mean your, your planners or everyone on your team who has something to share. This has been such a valuable opportunity. So thank you all, Viola, Greg, Michael. Thank you, Timothy. We have a quick survey that's coming up, but we'd love you all to just give us an idea about your experience. This is one of the first global MPI events, Transatlantic. The conversation, of course, does not end here. We sincerely hope that this gives you confidence and clarity and the practical guidance that you asked for at the beginning of our event. As you navigate global events this year, please connect with all of our panelists and Timothy on LinkedIn to continue to follow their thought leadership and journeys. And of course, please feel free to connect with everyone to continue the conversation, your UK Ireland chapter, your Rocky Mountain chapter, and to Tim's point, connect with other chapters, see what they're doing. Michael, you reminded us East Coast and West Coast and left coast are all different. So continue to connect and see how that can enrich your humanity and the humanity of your events. Again, if you could all go ahead and take that poll. Michael, thank you. Greg, thank you. Viola, sincere thanks. And Timothy for really adding an enrichment. Thank you, Brooke and Kiara, for bringing our chapters together today. We wish you all a fantastic day, a fantastic January, whether you're joining the gym or not, to continue to grow and get stronger, however you choose to do that. We wish you all a fantastic Wednesday, and thank you again.